advice, you are going to get politically coloured advice on scientific issues. Well, that leaves you in a bit of a spot, you being the general public. If you can't believe the official science bodies, not because of their scientists, but because of their managerial situation, if you can't believe them, where can you get information that's accurate about the scientific situation? Where can the Gosford City Council go to actually get some accurate scientific advice? And the answer is, around the world there are many hundred people like me who are retired former senior scientists who are now not beholden to managers. So if you want an independent view on most of these complex environmental matters, you have to go and find somebody who's retired and who before they retired were an acknowledged expert and preferably world leader in the field. And it's not hard to do, they're around. But you won't see them on the ABC, you won't see them on the SBS, and you won't find them quoted in the Sydney Morning Herald or the Melbourne Age. Now, if you find such a scientist who knows something about sea level, he or she would tell you this. Sea level changes. We know it changes over geological timescales, and we know from tide gauges that it changes over shorter term, decadal, centennial human timescales. So how do we measure that change as an objective scientist? And the answer is there are three ways of reconstructing what sea level is doing. Len has already spoken of one. He's spoken of the tide gauge that is located at Fort Denison, which has been very well maintained for 100 years and provides us with a very accurate indication of what sea level rise has been doing on this coast for the last 100 years or so. So there's the tide gauges. The tide gauges do not measure global sea level. They measure local relative sea level. And if you're the Gosford Council, that's what you want to know about. Would the Gosford Council, when it builds this new development here that Pat told us about, will they employ an architect to design the heating and cooling systems for this performing arts centre for the world average temperature? No, of course not. You'd sack the architect, wouldn't you? How long would an architect stay in business to win around? Yet you have a federal, a state government and councils that are setting sea level regulation based on global average sea level. It is literally astonishing that the media have allowed governments to get away with this happening without challenging them. But I've broken my train of logic. I want to go back to how do we measure sea level change. The first way is using tide gauges. That measures local relative sea level. The second way is, since 1992, we have had satellites which are capable of measuring sea level. And because the satellite is in stationary orbit and the Earth circles underneath, spins underneath, they measure every spot on the Earth's surface. So you can actually reconstruct, if you want to, a genuine global sea level signal from those satellites. And when you do that, interestingly, you get a number which is about twice the number of the best tide gauges. And there's probably something to do with the fact this is new technology, there's a lot of complex computer programming, and we don't quite yet have that data stream under control. But of course, if it's giving a number which is twice the number the tide gauges are giving, then you can imagine which number the ABC would like to use, and they do. So that's the second way of measuring sea level, is using a satellite, and it does actually measure global sea level should you be interested in it. But what the Gosford Council should be interested in is not that. It should be interested in what's the local sea level rise here, and the closest place you can measure that is Fort Denison, and Pat's already given you the numbers. Third way you can measure sea level rise is where I come into play as a geologist. Over longer periods of time, over thousands, tens of thousands to millions of years, you can go back and look at ancient muds, ancient sands, sedimentary rocks, and you can reconstruct a sea level signal from that. And that also, because you'll always be looking at an outcrop of mud or sand in a particular spot, so any sea level record that you reconstruct is a local relative sea level. Okay, so all coastal engineers understand that reality. They all understand that in terms of plying their trade, which is giving consultancy advice about developing a marina out here, or can I develop a block of shops on the foreshore there, they all understand that the best record they have available of local relative